Call the meeting of the Minot City Council to order for today, June 30th. Just a quick reminder for everyone to please silence or put their cell phones on vibrate so we can keep the distractions down to a minimum if possible. Roll call, please.
Janser.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Pittner.
Yes.
Padragula.
Here.
Straight.
Here.
Wolski. Sitma.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda is personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come to the podium and speak on any item that may or may not be on our agenda today. If you do come to the podium, we just ask that you state your name so that we have it for the public record. One more time for personal appearances, an opportunity to speak on any item or item that is not on our agenda. Okay, moving on. Number 4 is a public hearing, building relocation, 6201 24th Avenue Southeast. Kelly, I'll let you read the rest.
A public hearing to consider a request by Kevin Frederick to relocate a 40-foot by 60-foot steel building from 2005 Burdick Expressway East to 6201 24th Avenue Southeast, subject to conditions.
This is an opportunity, a public hearing, again, for anyone to speak in favor or opposed to the proposal that is before us on the public hearing. One more time. Anyone opposed or in favor or indifferent? If not, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Janser.
I move we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser.
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes, motion is approved. That takes us to number 5, the mayor's report. As I get into this, first and foremost, I do want to thank Acting Mayor Lisa Olson for sitting in and setting some records while I was off in Norway last 2 weeks ago now. So I want to say thank you for carrying the meeting for us, and I did actually tune in at 2 a.m. in Norway to catch the first half of it. Seeing is that it was a little bit of monumental as the first woman to lead a Minot City Council meeting. So again, thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with the initial meetings and schedule that I had leading up to the trip to Norway. On May 7th, we did have an intermodal strategic planning meeting, as well as a nonprofit leadership panel that Alderman Straight also joined me on, right along with City Manager Barry. City Town Hall meeting took place at Perkett Elementary on the 8th, and then MADC board meeting on the 9th. I did attend the Chief Master Sergeant Rousey's retirement at Minot Air Force Base on the 10th, and then twisted my arm. I did judge the Minot Taco Fest at the Minot Auditorium on the 11th. Fantastic event for anyone who didn't have the opportunity to attend. After coming back, I did meet with Representative Armstrong's different representatives here on the 30th, a couple of interviews with the local television stations, as well as a budget meeting on the 31st, and then Colonel Harris farewell event at Minot Air Force Base on the 31st. That takes us to Norway. We had taken off on June 13th and come back on the 25th. We were in Norway for a full 11 days. I'm going to try to keep this under a half hour. We had 11 days of very, very long day meetings and different opportunities with lots of different folks. Just for a quick background on the sister city relationship, this began in 1981. Actually, with Norsk Husfest initiating our sister city agreement, most of which did include the heritage sharing and cultural sharing aspect, which has then evolved into what it is today. It was established with many personal friendships and established many long friendships that on both sides from Norway and to Minot. You can also see that the University Exchange Program has been established in the past couple of years with Minot State University students studying in Telemark and Telemark students coming to Minot State University, which also played a big part in the MSU choir trip. There were 27 students and a couple of faculty members that also attended along the same itinerary, although we spent very little time together while we were over in Norway. So looking at some of the objectives, of course, we were looking at cultural exchange, business development, recycling and green energy programs, and then the community programs and planning discussions, everything from community gathering spaces to taking a look at their public transportation infrastructure from different size cities, what worked, what didn't work, and what could potentially be considered here in the United States or in Minot. So we start with cultural exchange programs. Of course, we met first with Mayor Hedda Foss-Fiva, who is the city mayor over in Cheyenne. She did welcome us on the very first day there with a couple of different meetings. The first one reestablishing the different discussions with what our sister city relationship is, and even some of the strained relationships points that both sides have experienced over the last couple of years. I think anyone who has been on social media can understand where some of those strained points are at, and Cheyenne, Norway also has some of them along the same lines as people wondering what the value is in the sister city relationship. Cultural sharing is significantly important, and as I had stated earlier, one of the main foundation pieces of this. However, I think incorporating and growing the business development and sharing aspects of the sister city relationship is only going to embolden and strengthen it in the future. And for some of the folks that may not look favorably on it, I think should put the proof in the pudding on why this is important. And we certainly hope to share more about that in the coming months and weeks and months. We did have the opportunity to spend Constitution Day, the Sainte Maille, in Cheyenne, and we got to stand at City Hall and then help lead the parade around town in a suit in 75 degrees, waving flags and yelling hurrah to the literally tens of thousands of people that line the streets for their celebration. I did have the opportunity to also visit their pension social, their retirees. It served coffee and cake, and this is where I first, I think, got the real flavor of how appreciative a lot of the older generation of Norwegians are towards Americans, most of that relating right back to World War II and direct memory on what America's involvement was with liberation of Norway. And many times it was absolutely no instigation in that conversation, but they're the ones who brought it up and were quick to say thank you on that. So it kind of gave you a little bit of a, I don't want to say goosebumps, but it got real, it got very real very quickly for several of us. Taking a look at the differences between the two cities and how they operate, we're looking at more than 50 council members for the city of Cheyenne with a full-time mayor and a full-time city manager. However, it starts to make a little more sense when you take a look at their socialized program, where the city itself is the one that is in charge of the schools, is in charge of the health care, is in charge of every aspect of the city, with the exception of the police department that is nationalized. So it does make more sense to, I guess, in that respect, to have a much more large-scale city government that handles all of the different departments and different aspects. However, they couldn't seem to wrap our head around 6 aldermen with a part-time mayor. So on both sides, it was somewhat a little bit interesting. The city itself, dating back to 1100 AD, although it burned to the ground many times from their past history, and just most recently was rebuilt in the late 1800s. So the city of Cheyenne and the city of Minot, respectfully, are about the same age building-wise, even though they've been around for substantially longer. Taking a look at some of what they have for quality of life factors in Cheyenne, they have a soccer team with a absolutely phenomenal stadium, and what I would equate to our 2 different football stadiums here in Minot. The soccer stadium there, though, as Europeans are much more profound at soccer, have spent a lot more money on theirs than even we have. Some of the different cultural aspects, some of the different churches that exist in Cheyenne, the Jerpin Medieval Church from 1153, or the most recent 1894 Neo-Gothic Cheyenne Church, that is one that second second to none that I've seen. One thing that, as we were looking into city services, they have one fire station for the entire city of 54,000 residents. One fire station located in the middle of town. As we were looking, they do have agreements with nearby other fire departments, but response time is closer to 25 minutes to a half hour. With their fire department in rural areas, it could be as much as an hour or 2 hours in the far reaches of Telemark County, farther away from Cheyenne. Part of this is, I think, a little different mentality. Their buildings are built a little bit differently. They don't quite have as much fast-burning material as Chief Kelly can attest to with what our modern building standards are. Built much more out of old-growth wood yet in Norway. And we only did come across a couple of buildings, what we saw on our entire tour, that looked like they had recent fires. But they also have a chimney sweep crew that goes out every 2 years and cleans chimneys. Found that very interesting. I'll share more with Kelly on some of the other little aspects of their fire department. I did want to talk about the business development aspects while we were in Norway. We had more individual meetings than I could probably even count within that 11 days. But I did want to specifically touch on the Chamber, the Friendly International Consultants within Cheyenne, Norway. We did meet with MSG Production Technology, a green research aerospace company. Also with the mayor of Kitsved, who gave us the tour of the Sandra Norheim Skiing Museum, which I think if anybody has any Norwegian roots has to stop there, because Sandra Norheim is buried just east of Minot. And if anybody has ever done any skiing whatsoever in their life, he's the one who essentially did the design and the retooling of skis to what they are today. Very big national pride point also of Norway, because they still is probably their biggest aspect of recreation, aside from biking and walking, is skiing. We did have a very extensive meeting with Telemark's mayor, which Telemark is considered a county, is called the county. In our case, it would be a state, talking about some of the different aspects to which we can explore for business opportunities down later. The Bamble mayor, and I won't try to pronounce his name, I tried and failed before, so I'm not going to try again. And then also, we did have a couple of a very lengthy meeting at the U.S. Embassy in Oslo, specifically with the specialist for U.S. commercial services and how it relates to taking Norwegian companies that have an idea that we want to bring to the United States, and the best avenue to get them here, to get their foothold, the customs issues that they would have to overcome, and then also the best avenues that have been tried and true and already done in other cases, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We did also develop some ideas and opportunities through that. I do want to also mention that taking a look at the agriculture industry of Norway, and I don't have the horse and the plow picture on here, but Norway does very much protect its agriculture industry with very high tariffs, and the discussions we had on several different fronts, even though that agriculture being North Dakota's #1 industry, I just don't see a tremendous amount of opportunity for food exports unless something else substantially changes from what we heard at the embassy and from what we heard from many of the other different business people that we talked to. They don't have nearly as many national parks as we do, but theirs are very large, and they are very proud of that. So I had to put Pierre Lecky on here. However, the more that we talked about their national park systems, hunting is also a very big thing in Norway. And many people own firearms and go out hunting on a regular basis. The more that I talked with Pierre and many others, that they found very big interest in the fact that we have a lot of hunting opportunities here in North Dakota, and encouraged me to talk with Visit Minot and the North Dakota Tourism Department on how we can help facilitate some conversations on our hunting capabilities here in North Dakota that many of them were not aware of. We did have some meetings in Notodden with the economic development team, and I did want to touch a little bit here on the Roaf recycling facility just outside of Oslo, Norway, seeing as this has been a point of discussion in our community. This is a separating facility, meaning it goes into one big garbage can and gets dumped out at this facility into huge piles, See on the bottom right, we have a very big front-end loader that dumps everything onto one conveyor and then through a building about the size of what I would say is the State Fair Center. They have nothing but belts and conveyors and separators and magnets and everything else that you can imagine. And if you can imagine, the building smells very sweet. At least that's what I told myself. But it separates everything down to the very few things out of everything that's thrown away that isn't recyclable. Even the composting. The garbage itself is then hauled off into Norway where they burn it into fuel. However, you have to get all of the plastics and everything else out long before it ever gets to that point. They have a landfill that's about a quarter of our size that is expected to last about another 100 years because so very little goes into their landfill. Everything else is recycled or burned for energy. What we don't have yet and what we are waiting on is the financials, because that's really what it's going to come down to is the viability if there is a substantial amount of, one, cost to the consumer, or two, if it is subsidized by Norway. With discussions from some of the Norwegians, let me back up here just a little bit if it's going to let me. Talking with some of the Norwegians, they have a very, very large, what we would call legacy fund compared to ours here in North Dakota. Theirs is $9 trillion with a T. They use less than 3% of their revenues for their actual budgeting for their national economy. And then they have a national income tax level at 50%. They tax themselves very heavily. Things cost substantially more over in Norway, and yet somehow these folks are considered the happiest people in the world. All of their social programs are funded through these heavy, high taxes, and they continue to grow this legacy fund. It was very difficult for me to wrap my head around a lot of it because it is so subsidized on every level, and yet I can see the vast separations because a lot of folks don't go out on a regular basis in Norway, in Oslo, in Skien. They might have their 1 day a week out, and they don't certainly have boats. They certainly don't have their campers. They might take the boat up the fjord to a rental lake cabin and spend a beautiful day on the fjord. Very different worlds, very different, I think, societies, but it is very interesting to see some of the substantial differences. On the cultural exchange, this was one point of interest that we certainly wanted to reach, seeing as the North Coast Fest had funded this expedition, is that we did visit 3 different stave churches on our trip in Eidsberg, Hedal, and then Oslo. Of course, the Oslo Stave Church is the original from which our stave church is replicated from, right in the city of Oslo. Of course, that wasn't its original location. It was moved there, and I don't have all of those dates off the top of my head, but each one of these built prior to around the year 1100 AD and are still in the condition that they were built in. The black on the exterior is a special kind of pine tar that they extract from the pine trees in Norway and Coat, and that is what preserves the churches. The bottom pictures are still some of the original paintings from the 11, 12, and 1300s when they were built. It's phenomenal to see just how much preservation that they have on them, although they said that 500 to 600 of these churches or thousands were built, and there are 29 left in existence because of a number of them were torn down, a number of them were burnt, or just fell into disrepair over the years until they really made a movement to try to preserve that heritage. We did visit Parliament in Oslo and spent some time with Telemark's representative Barod Hakrud and then also Sylvie Listhaug, who has herself been to Minot and the North Coast Fest. She is the Minister of Agriculture and Food, and as I mentioned, we had the discussions of any kind of potential agriculture commodity export or opportunity. Said it's one of those that's still worth exploring, but as I mentioned, with those trade obstacles, I definitely see some different avenues. However, with MADC's aspect, I did talk quite a bit about AGT Foods and how they're extracting the high protein out of the different products of peas and lentils, to which did catch their attention quite extensively. And we expect to actually debrief again with Stephanie and some other folks on being able to maybe carry on some of those conversations down the road on potential possibilities. Parliament was in session, and you can see the seats were not full. They were on a different kind of situation there where one person is testifying, the rest of the members can be out in the hallways, and then they come in and vote later. It's not always the way it is, but I did find that interesting enough to take a picture. That is their entire parliament. It would be very much like visiting the U.S. Capitol. The security in Oslo, I expected much more. We had one metal detector to go through, and we did have to provide a little bit of information, but that was it, and walk into their capital and got a tour by the representative Bard Hockrud, but right into the chambers and sat down and listened, and very much the way somebody would come here into City Hall, but this is their nation's capital. And the King's Palace is about a mile to the south, and every time the king is home, the flag was up, and the king evidently was in Oslo the entire time we were there. Did not get to meet with him, though. We did actually see the Viking ship from 780 AD that they found that was preserved, and that is the picture from the top of the ski jump in Oslo during one of the Winter Olympics of the past. I believe it was 2002, and at this point, as I mentioned, I could talk for literally hours and hours and hours on what we did, the people that we met, the meetings that we had. I will say to the folks that are wondering about skimming over some of the business opportunities, we did have several very specific opportunities to meet with a couple of different businesses that we're going to continue and marching very, very quickly towards hopefully bringing them over to Minot. Unfortunately, can't go into a lot of the details, and Stephanie's smiling because she knows exactly what we're talking about until we get a little farther down the road. We have a couple of obstacles to overcome, or hurdles to overcome. I don't think they're obstacles, but they're very excited about coming to Minot, and as long as we can get one or two little pinpoints, I think, pushed in, I'm hoping by this year that we do have a Norwegian company that is operating right here in the Magic City and providing a foothold for them to open up operations in the entire United States. I'm hoping I can talk a lot more about that in the future. Questions about Norway or some of the other aspects? And I do want to say before moving on that I have to say thank you to the North Coast Fest once again for stepping forward and for sponsoring this trip despite backlash from some of the folks in the community that somehow still cannot see the Resolute in or value in the cultural sharing or different business opportunities that will come to fruition in the near future for the city because of this relationship. I will end it with this as well. Folks from Cheyenne were very adamant that the delegation of Tom and I was probably the one piece that kept this sister city relationship from crumbling, as we have not had a delegation from Minot to Cheyenne in quite a while. And they had been receiving a little bit of pressure, as you can imagine, from some of the constituency as well, as they've sent delegations over, numerous delegations over in the past, and we just really haven't done a good enough job with our consistency. With that, too, we can expect next year, I believe it's the children's choir from Cheyenne, and I believe there's going to be more than 30 students with chaperones attending the North Coast Fest next year, and I do expect quite a few people this year at the North Coast Fest because of our trip as well. That will come in September, and hopefully we can have those folks identified for the rest of the community so they too can see value in what it was and why we went. With that, that is the end of my report. I'm going to turn things over to, wait, we do have a few more things. Appointments, yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move your appointments.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Olson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pondragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. City manager report is number 6 on our agenda. Acting City Manager, Mr. David Lakefield.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's my pleasure to give this report in Mr. Berry's absence this evening. I'll try to keep my comments to less than 30 minutes as well, so we can keep
Appreciate
things
that,
moving
sir.
We'll hit some of the highlights. Again, important dates, 6th of June, the SRJB board meeting at 4 o'clock p.m. at the auditorium. The 13th of June, we have a couple of items. Verendery Electric Co-op's annual meeting at 4:30 at the State Fair Center. Chamber Infrastructure, 7:30 a.m. at Homesteaders, so we can get breakfast and dinner that night. The 17th of June, IEDC Stakeholders Group, 9 a.m., Auditorium Room 201, and then City Council again at 5:30 here in Council Chambers. 18th of June, Chamber of Commerce Board meeting at 7:30 a.m. at the Grand Hotel. We have the City Council Budget Workshop at 4 p.m. on the 20th of June, and I'm sure you're excited to all participate in that again this year. 21st of June, the Magic Fund at 7:30 a.m. That's pending any applications. I'm not aware of any at this point, so we'll keep you informed on that. And then the Planning Commission again on the 24th of June, again here in Council Chambers. Some construction updates. There's been a lot going on the last couple of weeks, so we're going to give you some of the highlights here. Flood control, if anybody's been north on Broadway, there's a lot going on both sides of the highway. As you know, in the last couple of weeks, Broadway was completely closed down to accommodate some of that underground work that was being done. Some of us from the city here had the opportunity to go and tour some of that underground work that was being accomplished and actually walk through the storm drain portion of that construction. It was fairly impressive. It turns out the contractor was able to get that portion of the construction done on time to minimize the impacts to traffic. So it appears that that was probably a very wise decision to close the traffic down completely to minimize the impact that it would have had in the long run. We're still going to see head-to-head traffic until about the end of July. They were supposed to start vertical pours in some of the flood walls, I believe, this week or maybe even this morning. If you drove by, you can see exactly what was in the picture with the formwork going up and the rebar. So things are really starting to take shape. It's going to be very visible there along Broadway in the near future. There will be some upcoming impacts along 3rd Street and 5th Avenue that'll be coming as that work moves further east. More flood control. This is over by 16th Street. We have some animation. This is one of the pump stations in the background for the storm sewer. The design of this was made to fit in with the surrounding landscape and the architecture around there, so it wouldn't look so much like a pump station. It's pretty amazing some of the progress they've made. Again, 16th Street has reduced the head-to-head traffic to accommodate the utility relocation and also preparing for the flood control structure, the closure structure on the north side of the river there. Napa Valley, the levees are nearly complete. And again, the focus is on the pump station near Wee Links. And also there's the irrigation pump station that is being reconstructed to accommodate Wee Links as well. You want to keep watching this through a few more times? Okay, annual maintenance. There's 2 seasons in North Dakota, and I think today we can say winter is probably over, so we're going to move on to road construction. Street patching's already underway. I've seen this personally in some of the parts of town. It's scattered across the city as they work on those potholes and section repairs that they have to do. Typically, they're in and out, a relatively quick fashion. The one that I drove around the other day, they had a flag person there because it was one lane of traffic, so they were controlling the traffic. Street sealing is going to begin later in June. That'll be across the city. And we'll keep you updated on the areas and schedule for that. Improvement projects, we have upcoming overlay on North Broadway from 21st Avenue to 36th Avenue starting this week. It's expected to last about a month. Be some head-to-head traffic there as well. And then some concrete panel replacements on North and South Broadway from 20th Avenue Southwest to 16th Avenue Northwest. So a big stretch of Broadway is going to have some of those decaying portions replaced. NDR update, gathering space has been a hot topic in the recent past. We're making some progress. Some of it that notable here, we have 2 properties where we have a potential purchase agreement that would fall within HUD rules. We have 2 other property owners that have counter-offered and suggested land swaps. So we've identified some potential land, and we have to come up with the comparative value to see if we can get those to work out. We're still waiting on an appraisal for another property And unfortunately, at this point, we have one property that still remains outside the guidelines with their counteroffer. So we continue to work to see if we can reach some progress and come up with a deal on that remaining property as well. An emergency exercise at the airport. This is something scheduled June 12th from 1 to 4. It's a requirement. The airport goes through this periodically. You can expect some realistic simulations, meaning sirens, smoke, crash carnage, people that appear to be injured, emergency response vehicles. They do request the public avoid watching the exercise from the airport, just so that we don't create some congestion or traffic problems. They try to make this as lifelike as possible, so they need the room to work and respond as they would in a real emergency. Budget workshop. I know you're all just can't wait to go through this again. We have that coming up June 20th at 4 o'clock. We're going to start out with a brief overview, some current projections, the financial position of the city, and then a capital project funding discussion, and then hopefully some very open and candid discussion that will take place. This will be a much different approach than in years past. Some of the limitations that we are up against this year, and some of the guidance that we have been given by members of the council and city leaders. So we'll take a much different approach to it this year, and we're looking forward to some collaboration and some problem solving. Public Works Week was last week. I know there's a picture of Alderman Padragula enjoying the festivities. We had a number of younger children participating, taking a look at the different equipment. Got to sit in some of these different equipment and register to win some prizes. We have one young lady here signing her name on the blade of a snowplow. So I think it was very well received. I think we have a picture here maybe of the winner. One young lady got to ride to school the next day in a sanitation truck and actually got to pick up some containers along the way, so she was very excited about that. A number of the local vendors participated in bringing pieces of equipment to display, and also provided prizes to give away to the kids. So a good turnout, and I think some of the kids really enjoyed it. They seemed to like playing in the old bus that was there as opposed to the brand new bus. So it was pretty interesting. Here's the grand prize winner. I guess we're going to get to watch the video. By all accounts, her and her mother were quite excited when she got the news. So overall, I think it was a very good event and definitely educational for those that participated. Spring cleanup week. So some of the statistics and showing the comparison to the last few years. I know anybody that drove through town during this event, there was a lot of stuff out at the curb. So a lot of city crews driving around, not just in garbage trucks, but in pickups and trailers and picking up all different kinds of things. So I think it was a good effort, and in most accounts and most categories, the numbers were up this year as well. More fun was to be had this past Saturday, and I guess it was a lovely day. We had numerous city employees and some council members participate, and by all accounts, it was educational and definitely a fun and exciting time. So here's a few of the pictures from the Fire Department's Citizens Academy. I believe it was about 18 different people participated. Everyone survived, made it through the exercise. We have a couple council members now that I think that can sub for, in the case of emergencies, maybe. So it was good. Here's a few of the highlights. Any questions?
Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess in honor of Mr. Walski not being here, Dave, I have a couple of comments. One, Josh will appreciate that. I guess one thing I just wanted to mention as I was thinking about the flood walls and the pictures along Railway Ave, just over Broadway, if folks have an opportunity to take the south side of the river, the bike path and trail that currently exists, and look at the flood work happening, it's a fantastic kind of process that's in the works. But many of us have sat up here and we've had a discussion about betterments and the importance that some of us feel to have trails and not just flood walls. And that is case in point. If you think of a flood wall being 15 to 17 feet high right there, I can't think of a worse situation that we would have than just having straight flood walls and not having paths and trails. And this is a discussion that I want to continue to bring to the budget workshop as we move forward. Mr. Mayor, and I would really like to see if we could readjust the retreat and maybe move that to Cheyenne, Norway, if that's possible as well. I think everybody would benefit from a trip out of town. And Mr. Lakefield, just because you touched on it, I wanted to recognize and thank Mr. Lance Meyer. Over the last few weeks, I've had a number of neighborhood nuisance phone calls. Many of you have probably had them, from vacant lots and weeds to Christmas decorations that haven't come down as residents maybe are just vacant and gone out of their home, to graffiti. And it takes a tremendous amount of staff time. Lance, I thank you for taking the time. And I guess for residents, it's warm out, dogs are out. If we can be more neighborly and engage our neighbors to try to solve some of these issues, because it takes a tremendous amount of staff time to send out letters. And it's frustrating for everyone, but we need to figure out a way to be more neighborly, because if we have to call your council members to solve some of these problems, I don't think that's the best for our neighborhoods. So I just wanted to touch on that, Mr. Lakefield, and thanks for your time, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Straight, I would like to point out as well on that same subject that, they should report those incidences to the Public Works Department. There is a process for dealing with those nuisances, and it doesn't happen overnight, because it's the process is set out by city ordinance. So we have to go through the notification and go through that process, and it does take some time. So we can start and get the process underway, and hopefully that will speed up until we get some resolution too.
Mr. Lakefield, can they do that online?
I believe they can.
And that's where I look to Derek and say they can just go to the Public Works website and start that complaint electronically.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, obviously that is more efficient than calling the alderman and then having that information relayed, and it just adds another layer to that. So we can get things underway and get somebody out there to take a look at it and get the notification done and get things moving.
Any further questions for Mr. Lakefield? Thank you, sir. I would add, too, that within that process, it also provides for maybe a little more tracking ability if it's done electronically to begin with as well. City Attorney's report.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I submitted a written report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for our City Attorney this evening? Seeing none, that takes us to number 8 on our agenda. Consider the report of the Planning Commission.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Janser.
I would move the Planning Commission items.
We have a motion by Alderman Janser to move as recommended 8.1 through 8.5, the 5 different items. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Olson. This is an opportunity for anyone to pull any items. Otherwise, they will be passed as recommended, as the recommendations came out from the Planning Commission. If you do have an item that wants to be pulled, that you do want to be pulled, please raise your hand and let us know. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. That takes us to number 9 on our agenda, the consent agenda items. That is 9.1 through 9.15 on our agenda.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Olson, second by Alderman Janser. Again, these consent agenda items will be passed as recommended by city staff. If anyone does have any one item that they would like to be pulled, please let me know. Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 9.1 for
9.14?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Pull 9.14. Any other items need to be pulled? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Alderman Straight?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to commend staff. There were a number of things that we are granting here today that come via grants, and I think it's just something that has to be stated publicly, that our staff work really hard to deliver some dollars. For example, we're working on a final payment at the airport of $1,800 because of the strategic plan, and many of us participated in some open houses out there over the last couple of years, and so I think it's just something to touch on. Sometimes when we get through consent items, it might seem like to the public that we're not paying attention, but these are things I think that need to be recognized publicly.
Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion approved. 9.14, the approval of the CDBGR NDR infrastructure policies and procedures. The HUD policies encourage grantees to enact and enforce policies and procedures for the activities set forth in a HUD approval action plan. We have policies and procedures for those such activities and acquisitions, multifamily, rental, LMI housing, single-family LMI housing, but we do not yet have policies for the infrastructure activities because these activities have not until recently been in a position to proceed to construction. It's recommended the City Council grant approval of the CDBG NDR infrastructure policies and procedures for the such projects as the Gathering Space and Family Homeless Shelter.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Janser.
Second.
Second by Alderman Olson. Discussion, Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I just wanted to point out that Mr. Zakian, I appreciated I think we're at a 7-page document, and the amount of work to cross-reference and get a project moving is going to be fairly remarkable. It seems like we have to dot and check boxes and do everything repeatedly. But Mr. Mayor, as we're coming up on the 8th-year anniversary of this, I feel it's important to reiterate for folks like Mr. Zakian and Mr. Berry who were not here that the community had been through a tremendous amount. I know you personally, sir, had been, as many of us had, and I find it's incredibly important that we figure out a way to work within all of these requirements and all of these guidelines to try to get at yes. The public is increasingly frustrated at how slow we are to move on some things. I appreciate the homeless shelter stuff that we're going to deal with later, but I think it's important, as I spent time with my mom over the weekend, it's 8 years, but it's tough. So I'll shut up.
Thank you, Alderman Straight. And a final note on that as well, looking at some of the policies, procedures specifically relating to the gathering space, we can expect next city council meeting to have discussions regarding a deadline for the gathering space negotiations that I am anticipating likely looking at placing or proposing a deadline of September 30th of this year to have those negotiations for Site 2 either completed or to move on for considerations of alternative sites, seeing as our deadline for September 30th of 2022 is ticking away already. So we can look forward to that discussion at our next council meeting. Any further discussion on 914 for this evening? We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. That is completion of number 9. That takes us to the action items of 10. 10.1 is the revision of accounts payable job description to purchasing agent, financial professional, and move part-time finance person to a full-time financial specialist. The recommendation to the City Council is to approve the revision to the accounts payable job description to include procurement specialist.
So moved.
Approval.
Motion by Alderman Straight, second by Alderman Olson. Any discussion on the item? Discussion on the item. Please call the roll.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion approved. That goes to, takes us to 10.2, the professional consulting services for the RAC RFP process. The airport is exploring the possibilities of constructing a QTA for the benefit of the car rental customer and car rental companies. 3 recommendations. The first is recommended approval of the statement of work from the Landrum and Brown Incorporated to develop a request for proposal for the development of a quick-time turnaround QTA facility at the Monmouth International Airport. And 2, authorize the mayor to sign the application and documentation. And 3, pass an ordinance to amend the budget to increase the airport professional services for development of the RFP for the QTA facility.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Straight,
Second.
second by Alderman Olson. Any discussion on item 10.2 on recommendations? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion approved. 10.3 on our agenda is the extension of the eminent domain outside of the council contract at the recommendation of the involuntary acquisition buyout program for flood mitigation projects. After the issuance of an appropriate RFP, the city engaged Swanson and Warcup Ltd. to serve as the special outside counsel for eminent domain cases. There is currently 1 eminent domain case actively being heard in court, and 5 have been initially filed with the court. It's recommended to council approve the second 1-year extension of the modified eminent domain Swanson and Warcup contract to authorize the mayor to execute all related documents for extension.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Janser,
Second.
second by Alderman Olson. Any discussion on 10.3? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes, motion is approved. 10.4 is the CDM Smith no-cost extension agreement for allocation number 1. Allocation number 1 has 2 activities requiring the support delivery services from CDM Smith. The first is the environmental review in support of the final phase of the Northern Sanitary Sewer Project, which is being funded through the allocation number 1. The second is the Spot Blight Zombie Homes acquisition and demolition, which CDM Smith is providing environmental review and demolition compliance technical support. The recommendation to City Council is the Allocation 1 CDM Smith Agreement extension until June 30th of 2020 at no cost increase to current cap, and authorize the mayor to execute the extension agreement.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Olson,
Second.
second by Alderman Pittner. Alderman Straight, discussion.
Just for
I'm
the
sorry.
record.
Sorry, Alderman Straight, second.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out, I asked Mr. Zakian earlier today to send all of us an updated schedule of zombie home demolitions and their addresses, because many of you, like me, are probably getting phone calls, and the public is itching to know. And I guess it's just part of that is there's a real concern about some of these demolitions. It's hot, the rodents. If there can be some detail to those residents of what's going to happen, what's going to transpire if we're doing some remediation prior to, it would be beneficial. So I just wanted to touch on that within this item, sir.
Very good point, Alderman Straight. And for the public's information, the first of that demolition will take place tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at 1607 Burdick Expressway East. And I will be at the controls of one of those machines for the first couple of swipes, and after that, I'll let the professionals finish it out. Any further discussion on this agenda item? Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion approved. Number 10.5 is the sub-recipient agreement with Lutheran Social Services Housing Incorporated for the Family Homeless Shelter. It is recommended the City Council approve the sub-recipient agreement with Lutheran Social Services Housing Incorporated to construct and operate a family homeless shelter. The documents provided are available both on the website and also on the PDF that is on the handout this evening.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Straight.
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. I got it right this time. Any discussion? Discussion on 10.5 for the subrecipient agreement with Lutheran Social Services. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, real quick, I just wanted to commend Mr. Zakian for this. I had heard some real great feedback from many people that have been involved with this, and so, Mr. Zakian, thank you for your hard work. There was there's some real excitement about this project, so thank you.
Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 10.6, the subrecipient agreement with Lutheran Social Service Housing Incorporated for the LMI housing construction. The recommendation to the City Council to approve a subrecipient agreement with Lutheran Social Service Housing to construct 17 multifamily rental units focusing on the LMI households at risk of homelessness. Again, those documents are available on the website by downloading or on PDF.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Olson.
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the item. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, if we can have a clarification, I was, John, we're not building 17 new units, we're renovating, correct? The public is, as you can imagine, has reached out considerable amount of time saying, don't build more.
There we go. Nope. Hit it one more time so it's green.
Okay.
There we go.
Mayor Sidman, Alderman Straight. The answer is yes, these are going to be new units. Without going into more detail than is appropriate right now, these are the proposal you previously approved and this proposal work hand in glove. And in order for the homeless shelter to succeed and have the necessary operating revenues that Lutheran Social Services Housing will need to maintain that on an ongoing basis, there needed to be a secondary revenue stream. Without going again into too much detail, this subrecipient agreement for these 17 units, which are targeted LMI housing, there is a population group out there that clearly is at risk of homelessness. It could be for a variety of reasons. They're on the verge of being kicked out of their homes. There are many LMI residents that really don't have the capacity to manage the finances. So this is aimed at capturing a particular unique population of our residents that clearly qualify as LMI that really aren't a target market for existing housing. And the plan is that any income that's generated from these 17 units, which will be in the same footprint, that revenue above what is necessary to maintain the LMI housing units will be able to be used pursuant to this agreement to help fund the operations of the homeless shelter.
Further questions for Mr. Zakian? Continue.
I
Alderman
guess
Straight.
just because the public would want to ask the question, was there consideration of buying elsewhere, buying properties that existed instead of building new? Was there such a need to have it confined to this footprint?
Mayor Sitman, Alderman Straight, since the property hasn't been acquired, although a property has been identified at length in this discussion, we can't identify it, but I can tell you that if, as a result of these approvals, and this is totally up to Lutheran Social Services as to which property they acquire. If it's the property that's been identified, it will make perfect sense. We did explore various options. In order for us to actually make the connection that will make HUD comfortable of any revenue generated from the 17 units being able to roll over and help fund the homeless shelter, it really needs to be on the same footprint. We also explored the possibility of looking at existing facilities rather than building a new facility for the homeless shelter. And there are just not cost effectively. There aren't any other sites in the city. I know there's always discussion about some of these hotels that have been motels that have been closed. We're talking about 6 units. That is an enormous number for family homelessness, but it's not a very large number in terms of comparable to the existing hotels and motels that are closed or are on the market for sale. So we did extensively exhaust that. This has been a very long process, at least 9 or 10 months. I do want to express my appreciation for what you said before, Alderman Straight. I also want to give kudos to the entire vulnerable population group and also to Alderman Padragula, who's been involved in this from the very beginning. It has been a very truly cooperative community effort among all the different vulnerable population groups. And I certainly want to express appreciation to Lutheran Social Services Housing for going through all those hoops and loops and checking all those, marking all those T's and dotting all those I's. But that's kind of a long answer to your question. Yes, there has been extensive consideration given, but this is the most cost-effective means to follow.
Thanks, John.
One follow-up, Mr. Zakian, as well. If you could maybe refresh for the information purposes, the time frame of which that they will be contractually obligated to maintain that LMI, to maintain that status within these units.
It'll be 20 years, Mayor Sitma.
Thank you. Alderman Janser.
I want to commend the city staff and the other Lutheran Social Services and the other folks who've been involved in this. I'd been involved in several discussions about trying to fulfill this item in the NDR proposal that was submitted. And although it was well conceived from the sense that there was certainly a need identified, when you look at getting the thing set up and going is only one piece of the problem. The other piece is sustainment, and where does the money come from over months and years to keep that operation going on a 24-hour-a-day basis, 7 days a week and so forth, with staff and turning the lights on and paying for the heat and all of that. And so I think this is a rather elegant solution to solving those questions, and I commend you all for coming to that end.
Thank you, Alderman Janser. Further questions for John or any further comments? Thank you, John. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Straight?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. 10.7, as we had just mentioned, is kind of a glove in hand relating to the previous two, the authorization of the application to the Governor's Fund for Community Development, the two separate subrecipient agreements between the City of Minot and Lutheran Social Service Housing Incorporated to construct the 6-unit family emergency homeless shelter and a 17-unit LMI multifamily rental building. The CDBG NDR fund cannot cover all of the acquisition costs, and it is necessary for the LSSH Incorporated to find these such funds. The application being made to the Governor's Fund for Community Development in the amount of $760,000 is being made to cover those costs. It's recommended the City Council grant the authorization to apply for the $760,000 to the Governor's Fund for the Community Development set aside in support of the Lutheran Social Service Housing Project, being funded primarily through the two subrecipient agreements from the CDBG NDR grant, and authorize the mayor to sign all documents in support of the application.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Straight, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Straight?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Motion is approved. Last item on our actionable items is 10.8, the parking ramp roof and drainage system. There's two recommendations. The council authorize the design and construction of the EPDM roof system for both downtown parking structures, and two, recommend the council authorize the city engineer to negotiate a scope of and fee with EAPC to perform all the consulting services for the roofing project, and authorize the mayor to sign the contract.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Olson. Discussion on the item. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to cry over this one, but I guess this is one of those that we have to figure out a way to move forward on. I had asked some questions earlier about the legality of this, and we have to protect the assets that we have been trying to acquire, and as difficult as it is, I feel it's necessary, because I think it would be, on one hand, it would be more negligent if we don't, but I feel that we have to support this tonight, or at least I have to.
Thank you, Alderman Straight. I would also just add to that, looking at the situation of what we could feasibly run into in terms of the time frame for the legal action to come to fruition, could be as many as 6 or 7 years, depending on the first outcome and then any potential appeals. So it very well could be a very lengthy period of time. Could also be 1 year, but we don't have a good crystal ball to which the legal system, how that's going to play out. And absolutely, we do have to protect the asset that we do have downtown, and this being the best way to do that. Further discussion on 10.8. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes, motion is approved. That takes us to number 11, the miscellaneous and discussion items. As I was rolling through my commentary, I did forget about the pile of items sitting over here blocking part of Kelly's view, and I'll just quickly go through that as well. As I did meet with some of the different mayors from Norway, they did hand out a couple of different items that in the past, of course, have been given out to dignitaries from Minot that have visited. So we have a display case out in front from the different items through the past decades that have been given to City Hall for display. And I did have, and I even have to go back to my list here, from the Bamble mayor has a porcelain knife that is one of the evidently finest porcelain knives made anywhere in the world. I did not use it, so it will be put on the display case out front. From the city of Cheyenne, they do have one of the locally made hand-laden wine crafts with the Cheyenne emblem etched into the bottom with something that I'm going to have somebody translate for me. My Norwegian, well, it doesn't exist. And then there were a couple of other gifts as well from the Notodden mayor, some porcelain china that is made right in Porsgrunn. And this one has Telemark County written on it. And as I'm told, Telemark County is now going to become or rather is joining with another county right near it, so they're going to be joining what would be like North and South Dakota together in an effort to, I think, consolidate a lot of what they do in Norway, which I also found a little odd. But and then from the Telemark mayor, he did also give me one of their coffee cups that is also from Porsgrunn, part of the porcelain china that they make there. It also has the Telemark label on there, which he said will be a collector's item for our city hall in the future, because as they combine with another city, it'll be Telemark, or the county, and it'll be the other name of the county added on to the end of it. With that, I'm out of discussion items this evening. I'm sure that City Manager Barry will elaborate more on some of our business discussions and other items that will certainly go more than your 20-minute presentation there, Mr. Lakefield. If not, we're up for adjournment.
Move adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Pittner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.